Hi there, and welcome to the IBAC Tech Trek podcast. I'm Tom Reed, Science Officer on this journey to explore the outer reaches of insurance technology. Beaming aboard today is Kevin Lee, CEO of Fuse Insurance. Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Hey, good morning, Tom. How's it going? Things are
I'm well,
going
thank you.
well.
Good, good. Hey, so while you are a member of the IBAC Tech Committee and therefore obviously famous, not everybody will know you. So could you introduce yourself and talk a bit about Fuse and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. I run Fuse Insurance. We are a specialty lines commercial insurance brokerage based out of Calgary. We've been tech forward since day one when we started almost 7 years ago in August of 2017. I spend a lot of my day. We help small businesses with high risk and niche insurance needs find the coverage that best fits them while using a lot of tech to do the heavy lifting along the way for us.
Awesome. So let's dig into that a little bit. You talk about yourself as tech forward. Could you describe your quote unquote tech stack? What tools are integrated through BMS? Do you have any integrations with carriers? Um, Give us a sense of what your technology looks like and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Fuse Insurance, our co-founder Simon Lewa, he's actually a software engineer. He came from Deloitte cybersecurity management practice here in Calgary, and I came from the world of insurance. So I don't know how many insurance brokers have been founded by a software engineer, but I'm guessing that number is pretty low.
I'm
So
going to go
it
with maybe one.
Yeah, one would be Fuse. Yeah. So with that, we've had tech at the forefront of operations since day one, and that has led us to build up a fairly robust tech stack. So what we use is we use software from a company called CaliFy. That's spelled Calefy. They are a growing startup here in based out of Calgary that serves all across Canada, but what the Calify software does for us is it lives on our website and actually delivers us finished submissions as new leads. So we do use SEO tools. We use a bit of paid search advertising as well to drive traffic to our website. But when it gets there, that's when the magic really starts. Is most insurance websites, their contact information is name, phone number, email, the what you want box, and not very overly helpful to most brokers. Most people don't fill it in. The Calify software dynamically builds applications for us for over 400 different classes of business and asks us 95 to 100% of the underwriting questions we need to know right up front. And so when our brokers get a new lead, they have all the underwriting information. So it's there and it's faster to market, easier to work with, less redundant paperwork, less data entry. That smooths things along. Now, of course, capturing all that data up front helps us flesh out the rest of our tech stack. So we have Calify living on the front end, but growing from there, we also use Monday.com as a CRM tool. It is integrated with Calify, so leads automatically populate within there. And once leads are won in the Monday system, that is then put automatically using a combination of API connectivity between Monday and the Calify tools using API connectivity into our BMS platform, which is Vertafore SIG XP. So having that all integrated in there works quite nicely. We also have been, as you can probably guess, on the cloud since day one. So we have a variety of tools. We use the Google suite of products in our office. They do integrate nicely together, and of course integrate nicely with Monday, with Calify, and with the other software platforms there. Of course, we do have more connectivity built on top of that because as the insurance technology ecosystem continues to grow, we now have other connections out of those pieces of software. So the Calify side is integrated with a variety of mapping tools, including Google and Opta or Verisk, or however you pronounce their company name these days, but basically giving us dynamic flood mapping, wildfire mapping, quake mapping, and other fuss information to go along with these submissions to make them even better than they would otherwise already be. Through the SIG platform, we have integrations with our premium finance partners, and we work with them that way. Of course, we're members of CSIO, and we use all the eDoc downloads. And now and somewhat newer developments, the Calify software is now starting to work with us on some pre-populated rating tools and some connectivity there to help us speed up rating for some of our in-house programs as well. So that is helping us move things forward on that area.
Wow, that is quite unusual, and that probably boils down to the fact that you're the one brokerage that was co-founded by a software engineer.
Yeah.
I do have some other questions I want to ask you about sort of the impact of that, but one that you kind of tweaked that isn't, to be honest, on my script is have you, with all this upfront underwriting information that you're able to provide to the carrier, have you found that you have better uptake on your submissions? Do you get a better experience interacting with your carriers as a result?
Absolutely. I find that it comes from two sides. One is the selfish broker side, in that the faster we are to market, the less likely are we to be blocked. If we don't have to spend a bunch of back and forth time with our new lead gathering all that underwriting information, it's there. But we also find that it's a smoother underwriting experience because the software never forgets to ask the questions we want it to ask. Every broker out there has made that mistake of forgetting to ask for the mailing address or forgetting a piece of COPE information that's supposed to be on the submission that most carriers are going to turn around and shoot it right back to you and say, this has to be filled in before we can even log it, let alone underwrite it. And the software always remembers to ask those things. And so those minor mistakes that gum up the broking process are avoided by using the software. So it does make it smoother. And, the underwriters too like to see complete submissions come in. And any underwriter will tell you that they prioritize complete submissions. They go right to the top of the pile, get worked on first. And those half scrawled in, barely completed, handwritten, photographed paper application forms go right to the bottom. And that's not what we deliver to our insurer partners.
I'm sure that's the case. That's awesome. So let's dig into more again the sort of the business benefit of some of these tech tools you've implemented. So which of your tools would you say, I'm going to put into three different categories, and which of your tools do you think is most important for the growth of Fuse? Which would be most important from the client experience perspective, and which really benefits your team's productivity?
I would say that for both the growth of Fuse and for the client experience, it's certainly the CaliFy software. I find that it, not only is it a smoother onboarding process for most clients with a set of questions that's customized to their business. We're not asking roofing companies about their snow removal exposure. We're not asking interior painters about their hot work roofing. The questions are customized down to that exact specific class of business, and they reflect a ton of class of business where there barely are even application forms available. So we do a lot of work within the tech space, within controlled substances, and finding customized programs and underwriting questions for that easily available to leads who are looking to buy insurance is tough to find out there. So when they find that, we think it's an instant credibility builder for us that helps them come in. Of course, as I've mentioned, the experience for our brokers is also a lot easier because they're getting all that underwriting information up front and being able to easily triage risks at the management level so the right brokers are working on the right things, as well as, of course, the sped up broking and underwriting process for our brokers. But of course, that also means the process is sped up for our clients as well. So they're getting their quotes back faster. They're having an easier time getting things done. And the annoying back and forth is eliminated. I would say that from a internal business standpoint, though, what we've done with Monday.com has been extremely helpful. We've built out a robust series of tools within that. As for those of you who don't know, Monday is a very broad CRM system that's built somewhat on a spreadsheet model, but it's like spreadsheets on steroids, that you can do all sorts of automations, cross-linking, different boards, different permissions, all sorts of things like that. So having the tools there to help smoothly manage the onboarding renewal process as well as the prospect tracking process makes it so that our brokers have an easy glance at what their workload looks like in terms of a task-driven system for both new business and renewals at the same time, but also on a management level gives me and I insights into all of our performance, all of our different metrics we can pull out of that as to where things are going on, again, both the new business and the renewals front. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of the work on there. And of course, with those two software platforms I mentioned being integrated with SIG, it does make the BMS side of things easier and help keep the accounting side, the duplicated data entry, keep that all to as minimal levels so that we can just focus our efforts on being good insurance brokers.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question that you'll likely need to answer from your IBAC Tech committee experience because it's more personal insurance oriented. So the Wawanesa API sharing initiative, as you know, Kevin, was initiated by IBAC, is currently being managed by CSIO, is intended to break down barriers that exist in terms of carriers and broker vendors connecting back and forth. The project is currently focusing on personal insurance, which you don't do, but you're obviously well aware of that from your IBAC tech committee work. So maybe just give us your thoughts about that initiative and what benefits you see for brokers in general.
Well, I think that as many people listening to this podcast would know, and as Tom, you would definitely know, the CSIO has been beating the drum of standardization in insurance for a very long time. It's the whole reason why it was put together. Finding some standards for the APIs, the API project, or DX Connect and the other initiatives that CSIO has been doing, I think have all been steps in the right direction. But finding some standardization using the Wawanesa API is, I think, a very big step forward. I think it's one of our biggest steps forward we've had in this area for quite a long time, because it's a core that allows insurtech companies and carriers and everyone else involved in driving the insurance industry into the 21st century in Canada to have some commonality, so that, as everyone gets on board with standards that are actually truly standard across the industry, it means the development cycles are shortened. It makes things happen faster and unlocks the power of technology within the Canadian space. So I think it's something that's been really beneficial, and something I hope to see more carriers sign up with, and I hope to see expanded out into other areas. Obviously, very selfishly commercial lines, but I think too there's benefit to that even amongst other auxiliary insurance products as well. I think that certainly has my support to champion that, to drive it forward.
Fantastic. So speaking of connectivity or other bits of technology, what kind of improvements, if you could wave your magic wand, what kind of improvements do you think brokers need from either vendors, and carriers, as the case may be, to improve some of those key business pillars of growth, client experience, or productivity? What would you like to see happen to even further accelerate those business outcomes?
I think instead of picking on specific business outcomes, I'm going to pick a little bit more on the landscape itself, which I know is going to unlock outcomes. I'm going to elaborate what I mean by that. I think a stronger open API structure at all different facets of the insurance tech journey a client goes on to buy an insurance policy is important. I think that further unlocking of API connectivity for BMS platforms is particularly important to that. I think carriers unlocking more API access to more and more of their products is important. And I think having other add-on helpful software like CaliFy to help get that data up front and have it set up so it can go through those API processes as it goes up and down the chain is important. So having a more open API environment is what is going to drive that innovation that's going to allow everyone to succeed. I know that there's certainly some hesitancy around APIs and just in terms of data sharing and an open environment from a lot of different players within the insurance industry. But if we look at the biggest tech companies in the world, their API documents are public. They sit right on their website. You can use them, sign up for an account, pay your fees as applicable, and you can go ahead and use it. You can, a bit of programming knowledge, you could API into Google or Meta or any one of many, many dozens of other major tech companies without much hassle. And that type of, I think, institutional roadblocks that are being put up in the insurance industry is what is continuing to stifle the development of the Canadian insurtech landscape and the digital insurance world in Canada as compared to many other countries that are proceeding at a much faster pace.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22 for a lot of insurtechs, because it is difficult to make an API connection, and therefore, when an insurtech with a genius idea that needs access to carriers or access to a BMS approaches those organizations, the first question they get is, well, how many clients do you have? The answer is, well, I'm a startup. So, I might have one or two, but I sure as heck don't have 100. And so the pushback is, well, come back when you have clients. They're not going to get clients until they have carriers or vendors to connect to. And the reason that a lot of these places don't do that is because it is a heavy lift to actually make that connection happen. So why would they spend, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to connect with somebody who literally does not offer them any benefit today? Might in the future, but if those hurdles went away, and like you say, if you could connect to Aviva as easily as you could connect to Google, you wouldn't have those hurdles, and there'd be a lot more innovation as a result. So I think you're exactly correct there.
Yeah, I'm going to add a comment to that and say that when it comes to connecting with the companies like the Googles and stuff, the world, yes, I get they're bigger than any insurance company in Canada, but these API lifts that are done by them are one API for all. Obviously, I guess multiple APIs for different products, but it's one API framework, whether you're someone who uses a couple of hits a month on that API, like a small startup, or whether you hit millions of hits a day, like an Uber style company, for example, piggybacking off that data. It all flows through the same channel. So I think when it comes to the insurance companies in particular, and the BMS vendors a bit, but particularly the insurance companies, is stop looking at the API development process as a custom project with X insurtech or X brokerage with a certain number of clients, and looking at it more as one API for all. And then you use your own tech resources as a startup or a brokerage to leverage the tools that are put in front of you. And you take on the cost of development, building to the API that's available.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the ultimate win. And I think that that issue comes from a long history of individual sort of one-to-one connections between carrier X and BMS vendor Y, and carrier Z and BMS vendor A, and each of them have their own approaches, and therefore that has to be custom, and then that gets built up into a patchwork of stuff over time. And that's exactly what CSIO and the When You Say API Sharing Initiative are all about, breaking down so that there is one way to do it, whether you, as you say, hit that API once a day or a million times a day. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, Kevin. I've got one more question for you, and you and your organization and Simon are obviously very, very tech savvy. So you're out there, probably further than the vast majority of brokers. What advice would you give to brokers who are not as tech savvy as you, but who are interested in going down that path?
The advice I would give them is to stop and think about where their biggest roadblocks are. Is what manual processes in their office are taking them the most amount of time? Where are they finding that their salary dollars, their broker's time and frustration are being stymied by having to do things the old-fashioned way? And then look to see where tech solutions can help ease that pain. It doesn't have to go from 0 to 100 on day one with technology. It's something that can be built incrementally. It's called a tech stack, because where you stack multiple things together. There's no singular solution that is going to be out there where you're going to solve your problems from initial client contact to renewals and everything in between for the brokerage. So building up a smart tech stack is there. As a shameless sales pitch for the IBAC Tech Committee and for IBAC, there is the Tech Stackathon, or whatever name we've settled on, coming up at the Amplify conference in mid-September in Calgary. And certainly I think there's going to be some really cool results coming out of that, of some different iterations that work for different brokerages. Brokerages that specialize in personal lines or commercial lines or niche programs or big commercial risk all have different needs. So the tech stack for any one brokerage should not be the same as their neighbor down the street, because chances are their brokerage is not the exact same as their neighbor down the street. So having those intelligent conversations of figuring out your business needs, and then turning to your peers, whether that's through what we're going to amplify or informal conversations or through provincial broker association or however it is, to have these discussions with folks who may be a little further down the journey than you are, to get together with them and figure out what's working for them and why. And I feel that most brokers are willing to actually have that conversation and share that idea and be supportive of helping to move things forward. I know certainly, obviously we're huge champions of tech in the insurance industry, and any broker that wanted to talk to me about tech, I would always give them a bit of my time to have that conversation and at least point them in the right direction.
Yeah, my experience when I was on the carrier side and sort of helping organize some of these get-togethers was that the majority of brokers, there's always one holdout, but the vast majority of brokers are more than willing to spend their time with one of their colleagues and give them some insight. So that's a great call out to go to your peers, and because there's always somebody who's done something, right? You're rarely the first person. I mean, maybe with the exception of you and Simon, Kevin, but generally speaking, you're rarely the first one to actually have tried something. So going to somebody that does the same thing as you do and has already tried it, I think that's great advice. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, so we'll wrap it up here. So Kevin, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and insight, and live long and prosper.
The world of insurance is changing because the world of tech is changing. Join us on the journey at ibactech.ca.